They're kind of things you would recommend everyone have in their diet for good skin.
Yes, definitely eating anti-inflammatory foods makes a huge difference, because something that people don't realize very often is that
Is less more when it comes to skincare?
when I see these 10-step skincare routines, I'm like, oh my goodness, your skin barrier. When we're using all of these harsh skincare products or using too many skincare products, we actually damage that skin barrier.
Botox, starting that in your 20s is harmful for the skin, or is it really as anti-aging as it promises?
It's a total scam. What we're seeing now is that when you're paralyzing the muscles, once it wears off, your skin is actually becoming more lax. So it kind of creates the need to use more Botox. I mean, Botox, it's a toxin. There's so many other ways to do it that don't involve injecting poison into our face.
Indoor air pollution. Is this something that I need to be worried about?
No matter where you live, even if you don't live in a big city, in our homes, there is a lot of air pollution. There are a lot of things that you can do. Protect your health and your skin.
All right, balancers. Today's guest is a certified nutritionist, better known as the acne nutritionist. Her signature Clear Skin Plan program has helped thousands of people get to the root of their acne and clear it naturally using dietary and lifestyle changes, which is a topic I am very passionate about because we have so much power in tools that are available to us for free that can make the biggest impact on our health. So we're going to learn about some of those today. She's also the founder of Kuma and author of the Real Food Grocery Guide and Be Healthy Every Day with over 30,000 copies sold. My guest today is Maria Marlowe. Maria, warm welcome to The Balance Theory.
Thank you so much for having me.
No, it's a pleasure to have you here. I think it would be interesting for everyone to hear how you got into being a nutritionist, because I think it's quite important in terms of the context of where you've niched into.
Yes. Well, I never grew up wanting to be a nutritionist at all.
What did you want to be, out of curiosity?
I wanted to be Britney Spears' backup dancer.
Oh.
That was my goal in life when I was a kid. I loved watching music videos and dancing and did all the competitions and all that stuff. But when I was about 16, or right after my 16th birthday, I started getting acne. And no matter what I did, I started with the drugstore creams and then went to the dermatologist and tried their prescription medications. No matter what I tried, the acne just would not fully go away, or it would go away for a period and then come back. And so this went on for years, like 4 or 5 years. And it got to the point where I became really discouraged, and I thought that there was something wrong with me because I was doing everything I was told to do that was going to clear my acne and nothing worked. So I literally thought I was broken, something was wrong. And it wasn't until I got to college and I happened to just meet a friend there who grew up very differently than me. She grew up eating organic foods, and her mom was like more natural and all this stuff and eating healthy. And she's like, you know, you might be breaking out because of what you're eating. And I was like, what? Like, no, there's no connection between what you eat and your skin. And this was over a decade ago. So at that time, nobody was really talking about the food and skin connection. And so anyway, long story short, I was desperate and willing to try anything. She had recommended some doctors and resources. I looked into it. I drastically changed my diet, and my skin cleared up in about 3 months.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And I was like, wow, why doesn't anyone teach us this? And then that is what got me interested in nutrition. And I ended up changing career paths to study nutrition and healthy cooking, and really made it my mission to teach people about the connection between the skin and food and our gut and our skin.
That's amazing. So just before we kind of go into the nitty gritty of what you do and tips, what you've learned, can it help anyone, like in terms of their diet and skin relationship, or was it specific to acne only, kind of like the tools you've learned?
Yeah, to anyone with inflammatory skin conditions, food and your diet and your gut health can make a huge difference, because what the research is showing now, that a lot of these inflammatory skin conditions like acne, psoriasis, rosacea, there is a link to the gut. And if you start with the gut and heal the gut, you'll find that your skin improves significantly.
Yeah, I definitely believe that. So a lot of people find it difficult to make time to plan and organize their food, right? They might keep saying that they want to have a healthier lifestyle, but they can't practically find the time to do it. What tips do you have for people to make that process just easier as a starting point to actually start? Because I feel like you can learn about all this stuff, but the practicality of making that change is often the first hurdle.
Yeah. I hear you 100%. So I think being organized and planning a little bit, well, actually, it depends. I feel like there's two types of people. There's the people that like to plan ahead and know exactly
That's
what
me.
they're going to eat for the week. Yeah. And then there's other people that gives them anxiety to think about the whole week of what they're going to eat, and they want to go with the flow a little bit more. So kind of figure out who you are and then go in that direction. But if you can plan ahead, then you know which groceries to buy, you know how to prep. I'm a huge fan of meal prepping, and not necessarily meal prepping, but whenever you make a meal, you make a larger quantity of it, so you can have it for lunch the next day, or maybe even 2 days, so that you get that longevity. You're cooking once and eating 3 times, and so I think that's really helpful. Chopping your veggies once you get home, washing your produce and chopping it and drying it off and putting in the fridge makes it easier to use during the week. So instead of reaching for a bag of chips, you can reach for the carrot sticks and hummus because the carrots are already cut and cleaned, you know? Because if they're not cleaned yet, you're just like, I'm just gonna get the chips. So I think the convenience factor is a big part of it. Putting apples or fresh fruit on your table where you can see it. That way, when you walk by it, you're like, okay, let me have something healthy instead of the chocolate's on the table, let me eat the chocolate. So I think just making healthy eating more convenient is very helpful to actually following through and eating in a healthy way.
Yeah, it is true that by making it convenient makes it more accessible, because half the time we don't do it just because it's not there and done. So
Right.
like pre-doing those things removes also that decision fatigue of now I have to on the day think about what I'm going to eat, order, prepare it. It's like half of the work is done, so it no longer becomes something hard or like far away from you to do. It's like
Right.
you're half done.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
So there's no excuses then.
Yeah, 100%. One thing quickly on this note. So you mentioned washing vegetables. How do you recommend is the best way to wash vegetables? Because I feel like you get really mixed reviews, and even if you buy organic, everyone says wash it. So like, what's the best way to wash our vegetables?
So it depends the type of vegetables. Like dark leafy greens, I like to make a little, like fill a bowl of cold water in the sink and really swish them around in there to get all the dirt out. And then if you're not going to eat them right away, and then you would just basically, take the greens out into a colander, and then you might have to repeat that process like 2 or 3 times to get all the dirt out. And if you're not going to eat the greens right away, you do have to dry them. So that is one thing.
I've learned that the hard way.
Yeah, if you're washing any of your vegetables to be used later, make sure you dry them completely before you put them in the fridge, because then they will go bad if they're wet. So that's that. Or, for other vegetables, just water. You don't need to use these special sprays or anything like that. I think water is completely fine. And when possible, try to buy organic because it will have less residue on it compared to conventional.
I've heard like to use a bit of white vinegar or like lemon. Is that any more beneficial in terms of just water?
You can use that, especially like for berries, for example.
Like the bicarb, I think it is.
Yeah. You could certainly do that. Again, just make sure that you're drying things.
Yeah.
It basically will kill any like if there's any spores of anything, because sometimes your fruit goes moldy very quickly. It will just help to prolong that a little bit more. There are also these paper sheets that you can buy that are specifically designed to keep your produce fresher. So that's also something that you could do, like stick it in your berry, the thing with your berries, just to prolong it a little bit more.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
So many people turn to elimination diets in an attempt to get healthier in general, but byproduct as well, like make their skin better. They eliminate dairy, gluten, and go on these kind of like extreme diets.
Yeah.
Are these more helpful, or can they be actually harmful in the pursuit of trying to be healthier?
So it really depends. I think that now with this rise of social media, there's also a rise of these very extreme diets, like things like carnivore diets or keto, or even vegan, where people are cutting out whole food groups. And I think that when we do that, we do run the risk of cutting out things that we need and becoming nutrient deficient if we're cutting out whole food groups. So that is something you want to be mindful of. The other thing that I always teach people is to be what I call a body detective. So what happens sometimes is you see a diet on social media that worked for somebody else and they had amazing results, and they're, carnivore Timmy or, vegan Veronica or whatever it is. And you're like, okay, wow, I want those results. And so you start following this because your mind thinks it's a good idea. And maybe in the beginning it is helpful. You do notice positive results, but over time you may start getting symptoms, and you ignore those symptoms because you think that this is the best diet for you. But I always say your body will tell you. It's always communicating. So things like headaches, acne, skin problems, PMS, weak nails, your hair falling out, all of these are actually communications from your body, and then it's up to you to kind of determine what your body is trying to tell you. And that's why working with a nutritionist, if you do have specific issues, can be really helpful because they can help you pinpoint what's going on. And then the last thing I'll say here, though, when it comes to acne, and really any issue in general, sometimes we can have food sensitivities, and there are certain foods that can create inflammation in the body, which lead to problems. And so eliminating certain foods, going on a short-term elimination diet for like 2 weeks, can be helpful to determine if you are sensitive to that food, but then you want to reintroduce it. Like, that's the thing, that there is a reintroduction. It's not just elimination, it's reintroduction. And then you determine, okay, is this food a food that I'm sensitive to and it's problematic for me, or is it not? And that's why, again, working with a nutritionist who can help guide you so you're not doing it blindly, and making sure that, okay, if you are eliminating certain foods because they're not the right fit for you, that you're eating enough of the other foods to get everything that you need.
Yeah, definitely. I've always thought this with elimination diets. I mean, don't get me wrong, I've had my time experimenting with keto and doing different things, but I've always thought if we completely remove something, that to me just doesn't feel like a balanced way to eat, like completely remove something. Of course, unless it's a serious issue like celiac or something where you actually have to do that.
Right.
So for people to just get the general gist of how and what we should be eating, can you talk to us about food groups that we should be looking at every day? Is it more about the macros? Like, as someone who is not native in terms of like nutrition language, but I'm very interested in it, what are the ways I should be looking at my diet in terms of having a balanced diet?
We want to have plenty of fiber, protein, and healthy fats. So what that translates to is plenty of vegetables and fruit.
Which is our fiber?
Yeah, which is our fiber, exactly. Then our animal proteins, meat, eggs, fish, even there's plant proteins like organic tofu, beans, lentils. Those are our sources of protein. And then healthy fats are things like nuts, seeds, avocado, olive oil, things like that. Those we want to make sure we're getting. We can also get in whole grains. That's going to be, they're carbohydrates, and they're also a source of fiber if we're having whole grains. But basically, we want to make sure that we're getting those components at every meal, or almost every meal. If, every once in a while, I know it's sometimes you're eating out or something like that, so you may not get as much of everything as you need. But if we aim to eat, I call it the healthy plate ratio. So about 50% of your plate vegetables, a quarter of your plate protein, and a quarter of your plate could be whole grains, or it could be more veggies, etc. And then fat on top is your dressing. There's also going to be fat in your animal protein. And you eat that way, and you don't have to count calories, or you don't have to, obsess over food and what you're eating, because you're eating in a well-balanced way.
That feels a lot lighter, because I've also done the whole calorie counting thing, and it felt like I was being choked when I was doing that. But I'm glad I did it for the time I did, because now I can eyeball things and know roughly. So I think like there's again, it's not a permanent thing, like the fad diets are not permanent, but temporarily they can have some value. Question, because I cook for me and my husband, right? And naturally he eats more than me. I always give him more food than what I give myself. He's just bigger and consumes more calories, full stop. In terms of the healthy plate ratio, would the same apply, just like supersize for him, or would I be thinking about giving him a bit more protein?
Yeah, so he could have a bit more protein as well. Yes, it's kind of those supersized, and that, like, if you think about it, maybe your plate's a little bit smaller than his plate, but the similar ratios or similar proportions of foods. So yes, absolutely. If he's a guy, even my husband, he eats like double, what I eat sometimes. But it's still kind of the same idea of getting half of your meal from vegetables, getting all that fiber in, then getting your protein, and then getting, your carbohydrates, your whole grains, whatever else is on the plate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if we're talking about, I mean, obviously your thing is skin and having healthy skin. Everyone wants glowing, healthy skin. Is it better to eat anti-inflammatory foods for that? Is the base having the balanced diet and then adding these things on top? Or are there kind of things you would recommend everyone have in their diet for good skin?
Yes, definitely eating anti-inflammatory foods makes a huge difference, because something that people don't realize very often is that acne is actually an inflammatory condition. So if you look up the definition of it, it's defined as a chronic inflammatory disorder. And it's not a bacterial infection as most people think. And that's why food has such a powerful impact on our skin, because it influences our inflammation levels. So definitely eating anti-inflammatory foods, which again are kind of everything we talked about, the vegetables, the fruit, even your high quality proteins, or wild salmon, fatty fish with omega-3, all of these things are going to help to reduce inflammation in the body. So that's kind of the basis. Additional foods that could be helpful in particular are things like dark leafy greens, a great source of fiber, but they're also rich in a variety of different nutrients. Citrus fruits are also really good. Orange fruits and vegetables are going to be really good for acne-prone skin because they're a source of beta-carotene, and the body converts that into vitamin A. And a lot of acne patients are actually deficient in vitamin A. Not all, but for many people with acne, vitamin A deficiency plays a role. So if that is you, someone like that, then adding in more vitamin A rich foods can actually help clear the skin. What else? Omega-3 rich foods. These are really, really important for acne prone people, but all of us actually, because we all need omega-3, whether we have acne or not. And omega-3 is found primarily in seafood and in seeds. So like hemp seed, chia seed, flax seeds. And a lot of people don't eat these foods on a regular basis. So it's very easy to become omega-3 deficient. And it's really important, not just for our skin, but even for our mental health, that we're getting enough omega-3.
Yeah, this makes so much sense because I met someone the other day and she had just experienced rosacea for the first time. She'd never had it. But it makes sense to me how something like that could come up if you end up being deficient and having an out of balance diet, like how something like that, which is an inflammatory rosacea is right. It is an inflammatory thing.
Right.
How that could come up just based off a diet. I'd be really interested to hear for you when you learned this from your friend and kind of went deep into all of this stuff. What were like some of the main things you removed from your diet and some of the main things you added on?
So definitely the sugar. That was a big one that had to go. I was addicted to sugar for sure, eating cookies and cakes and all sorts of sweet things, and not even dessert type stuff, but even, refined sugars, refined carbohydrates, things like cereals, for example, bread, pasta. Like my whole diet was refined carbohydrates. So my blood sugar was, probably like this all day long, and that creates inflammation in the body. And it actually makes your skin more oily. So this is
interesting.
Something, that is just mind-blowing. But that when we eat a high glycemic load diet, which is one full of a lot of sugar, refined carbohydrates, it actually causes our skin to produce more oil. And more oil means more prone to acne. So if you are someone suffering with acne, trying to keep your blood sugar more balanced and cutting out, I'm not saying you can never eat sugar, but we want to, first of all, prioritize whole sugars and whole carbohydrates, again, like the whole grains, whole fruit, for example, versus the candy and the soda and all of that. And so that was really number one. The second thing is processed foods. So even the savory ones like chips, for example, I also loved, which are fried in vegetable oils. And vegetable oils are very pro-inflammatory. And growing up in America, we ate a lot of packaged and processed foods, and everything is doused in these vegetable oils, and you just consume so many of them, and it really creates inflammation in the body. So I had to move away from the packaged stuff and move towards the whole foods, the vegetables, the salmon. I started eating fish for the first time in my life, meat, even eggs, just eating whole real foods instead of something out of a box. Yep. So that really made a huge difference for me.
I can imagine that would have been a really hard shift initially because I guess it's habitual, right? Like you're eating the way you've grown up eating and what's second nature to you. For people who are thinking, listening, maybe want to make some changes in their diet, what's the most practical or best way for long-term to make sure they stick to it long term, not just for 2 weeks.
Yes.
What's the best way for them to start making those changes?
That's an excellent question. So I'm all about the upgrades. So whatever you're eating now, you want to upgrade it. So like, let's say sugar is addictive, and you do go through a little bit of a withdrawal period when you start to reduce it. So you want to take the foods that you're eating, let's say it's chips and cookies. Those are kind of your weaknesses, and you know that they're not great for you, but you can't help yourself. Upgrade them. So you can either look for brands. Now in 2024, there's so many brands that make healthier versions of all our favorite junk foods and snack foods. So just upgrade to brands that use better, higher quality oils. They use less sugar. Maybe they're using dates, for example, like they're using fruit to sweeten the dessert versus refined sugar. So you want to upgrade that way so you get the taste that you're looking for, but in a healthier way. And then over time, you kind of just think of them more as a treat versus something that is a staple in your everyday diet, right? So upgrades is number one. The second thing, which I always tell people, the first change that you can make that really makes a big difference is making that 50% of your plate vegetables. And here's why. If you're not used to eating fiber, once you start eating it, you're going to realize it actually fills you up. And so when you're eating enough fiber and enough protein as well, that's another thing where I think sometimes like women especially are not eating enough protein. And so they're always hungry. And what do you reach for? You reach for quick energy, which is the sugary snack. So when you eat enough fiber and enough protein, you sort of crowd out the other less healthy foods because you're full and you don't have that sugar craving, and you're not getting hangry, so hungry that you're angry at 3 o'clock or even earlier in the day. And by eating a well-balanced meals throughout the day, you're going to find that your desire to snack and to eat desserts and to eat unhealthy things actually starts to diminish.
Because those cravings are they're like flags of deficiency, right? Or it's like something hasn't been satisfied, so we're like going for more. I think there's and I'm correct me if I'm wrong, if you have different thoughts. I think as females especially, there's obviously moments in the month, like maybe right before we get our period, where we need more calories. And for me personally, I let myself indulge in those periods, but it's really what we do most of the time, right? We're not looking to be perfect 24/7 with the diet. It's like the decisions you make most of the time. One thing people maybe don't talk about enough is the importance of breakfast and what having a good amount of protein at breakfast looks like. Can you give us just some ideas of what having enough protein in the morning would look like? Because often it's like a very rushed thing. We want to make it easy. So do you just have any ideas that make it easy to get that amount of protein in the morning? The reason I ask this as well is because I feel like if you I'm from Australia, breakfast is like the most important meal. But when I travel back home, like to where my family's from in Italy, it's like a non-event. It's like just have your coffee and get on with your day. But when I fall into that lifestyle, I'm so hungry because I haven't fueled myself in the morning. So bit of a tangent, but I think it's important for people to just get a practical idea of how much protein is enough in the morning and what does that look like?
Yeah. In general, aiming for about 30 grams of protein at each meal, including breakfast, will help you feel more satiated and full. And you'll likely find that if you're snacking now, when you start eating 30 grams of protein, you're probably not going to want to do snack in between meals because you feel so satiated. So what does that look like? For eggs, 2 eggs is not going to cut it. Each egg is only about 6 grams of protein, 6 or 7.
That doesn't feel right.
Yeah, so 2 eggs is not a complete breakfast. So for example, for me, I like to do 3 eggs, so that's about 18 grams of protein, and then have another source of protein on the side. So maybe that is some free-range chicken sausages, maybe that is some smoked salmon. Sometimes what I do, like if I've made salmon the night before, I just did this the other day, and we had leftover salmon, so the next morning I just cut up some of that salmon and scrambled it into my eggs. So I would hit the 30 grams of protein. So whatever it is, you could do beans. In the US, there's a lot of these bean companies that make these packages of beans that are already flavored. So they're really delicious. So I tell people okay, if you don't have time, just get these because they're already really yummy. Put that on the side. So if you're going to do eggs, something like that, either make sure you're eating enough eggs or make sure you're pairing it with another source of protein. Another easy thing that you can do is if you really don't have time You could do a smoothie and I like to do a mix personally of 20 grams of a plant protein plus 10 grams of collagen powder. So we get the 30 grams, and then make sure you're putting whole fruit in there. And then I like to just use water, as the liquid. What else could you do? Sometimes you don't have to eat a breakfast food for breakfast. So you could also eat savory things for, something that you would eat for dinner, for example. You could totally have it. There's no reason you couldn't have it for breakfast. So I would say eggs are probably the easiest thing, and they're something that we sort of think of in terms of breakfast, but just make sure that you're pairing it with something else.
Yeah. The only other question I have on this kind of topic is I find when I have like a rest day, right? Because I normally work out first thing in the morning. When I have a rest day, I feel like I'm not as hungry throughout the day because obviously exercise spikes my hunger a little bit. I'm burning more calories. And so my kind of habit is to eat less sometimes, or sometimes I really just have breakfast, like lunch and dinner. Like I'll almost take out a meal because I'm just not that hungry. Is that bad? Like, should I be trying to eat the same amount of calories every day, or is it more I should just have a base for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and then just have more on the days I train?
It really depends. I always say that.
Sorry, I'll just say like fitness goals aside, because obviously if you want more muscle and that, it complicates it. But just generally, if I'm not working out, should I be eating less?
You want to always listen to your body. So you definitely want to eat more on the days that you are training and working out because you're expending more, so you need it. And what people sometimes don't realize is that when you are working out, in order to build muscle, you do need protein. So if you're spending all this time at the gym and you're not eating enough calories and protein, you're not going to get muscles. Your body's not going to respond the way that you're expecting it to respond because you're not giving it what it needs to fuel that muscle growth. So I will say that on the days that you're not working out, I think that it is ideal to start with breakfast because it just starts your metabolism for the day, and it helps to keep your blood sugar more stable throughout the day. And that is really the goal kind of across the board for our health, is we want to make sure that our blood sugar levels are stable, because when they're not stable, we get things like acne and other skin conditions. It's not good for our immune system. It's not good for our weight and metabolism. So in my opinion, ideally, we do start with breakfast every day. Maybe it's just a smaller breakfast than you would normally have, but having something to kind of jumpstart your metabolism and keep your blood sugar stable is ideal.
Yeah. Thanks for answering that.
Yeah.
So I want to switch topics now to skincare. The skincare industry is like $1 billion industry. So many of us spend a lot of money on skincare products every year. You always hear people talking about their 8-product skincare routine. Is less more when it comes to skincare?
Less is definitely more when it comes to skincare. When I see these 10-step skincare routines, I'm like, oh my goodness, your skin barrier. Like, poor skin barrier.
What do you mean by skin barrier? Can you break that down for us?
Yeah, so your skin barrier is your outer layer of skin that's really there to not only protect your skin from pollution and the environment, but it's also to keep your skin hydrated and keep everything inside as well. And so when we're using all of these harsh skincare products, or using too many skincare products, or scrubbing our skin too much, we actually damage that skin barrier. And when our skin barrier is damaged, well, what happens? We're more susceptible and sensitive to pollution, to skincare products, to whatever we're putting on our skin. And our skin is more likely to dry out because our skin barrier is not able to hold that moisture inside. And so, in my opinion, gentle skincare is the way to go. We don't really need so many products, and we don't need such harsh products. My whole philosophy is that if you nourish your skin from the inside out, your diet is really going to do the heavy lifting in terms of your skin, in terms of clearing your skin, in terms of hydrating your skin, in terms of just really supporting the healthiest skin. It really starts in your gut, and it starts with your diet and making sure you're getting enough nutrients. And when we take care of the nutrition piece and the stress piece, I have to throw that in because that also really impacts our skin. When we do that, we don't need as much skincare.
Yeah. I don't know if people find this annoying or as a good thing, but it always comes back to the fundamentals: your hydration, your sleep, your diet, and your stress management. Like, it's not about the 10 products that you saw someone else using. Like, it's really those fundamentals. Like, someone asked me the other day, they were like, what's your skincare routine? and I literally like cleanse and moisturize. That's it. Like I don't do anything crazy. I don't spend crazy money. Like for me, I was raised that way. Like my mom's always been like less is more, but you do question it sometimes when you see people online that really are like really glowing and they have all these products, and you kind of question like, do I need to be like buying all those things? So it's reassuring to hear that. And I think one thing people forget is like your skin is an organ. So like imagine everything you're putting on is like being absorbed into your skin and every part. Like I always forget that, but I try and remind myself that when I'm like trying different things, or like just thinking about what I'm putting on my face and body in general, which kind of leads me on to a topic that you talk about, which is indoor air pollution. This is not something I've thought about, if I'm being 100% honest with you. Is this something that I need to be worried about?
No, you don't need anything. You don't need to worry about anything, because worrying is like the worst thing for us.
Should I be thinking about it maybe?
Yes. So especially here where we live in Dubai, it's very polluted here. And no matter where you live, even if you don't live in a big city, in our homes, there is a lot of air pollution from, for example, if you have fire, a gas stove, we're walking in with our shoes and there's pollution and dirt and things coming in from the outside. So there is pollution in the home, but there are a lot of things that you can do to mitigate it and to protect your health and your skin. So doing things that help to purify the air, so getting an air purifier. So we definitely have those in all of our rooms. But you could also get plants. There are certain plants that will actually clean the air, like the snake plant, for example. And there's lists. Yeah, there's lists of all these different plants that actually help to filter out toxins from the air that are very beneficial for home environments. So you could put plants in there. You also want to make sure that you're having enough antioxidants. And I would say most people would think about that externally, like putting an antioxidant on your skin, like vitamin C or vitamin E, which you could do. But I also think ingesting the antioxidants, all of our fruits and vegetables, making sure that we're getting our vitamin C and our vitamin E internally, that could be really helpful to protect your skin from the inside out. And also nourishing our gut, funny enough, because with pollution, whether it's from the outside or from the inside, it again can have a negative effect on our skin barrier. And we know that there is a connection between the gut barrier and the skin barrier. And so if we can nourish our guts with good bacteria, that will actually strengthen our gut lining and can help to strengthen our skin to reduce that transepidermal water loss and just help to make sure that our skin barrier is the healthiest that it could be.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I never really considered the pollution that could exist inside my house and how that might, impact my skin.
Yeah.
So when I saw it was like something you spoke about, I thought it was just like really interesting for people to think about. And then I love the inside out approach, because then that helps you not just in the home, but when you're outside, which is really like an environment you can't control at all. You also speak about something which is a personal interest of mine, which is about reversing grey hair. Now, I want to preface this conversation by saying I'm actually considering letting mine go. And I don't think there's anything wrong with like aging and embracing it. But I'm just curious in terms of the possibility of reversing it, both that and hair loss, which is something actually a lot of people experience here in Dubai, especially when they move here. How is that even possible? And is that the case even for people where early greys are genetic?
So this is not something I would have ever thought had I not experienced it myself. But yes, it is completely possible to reverse gray hairs. Now, if it's genetic, then this is not referring to people who have genetic graying.
Damn.
Yeah.
But this is like stress grays.
Yeah, so stress grays. And interestingly, for the past few decades, there have been a few case studies in the scientific literature where one, dermatologist or doctor will be like, I had this patient and incredibly their hair was gray on the end, but it was dark, at the root, which is a sign that they're reversing their gray hair. And so there were a few case studies, and a few years ago, researchers actually did a small clinical trial with about a dozen people, so it was very small, over a long period of time, and they did find that when the participants were experiencing periods of stress, their hair grayed, but when they had periods of low stress and relaxation, their gray is actually reversed. So it has actually been shown in the scientific literature that yes, it's possible. And we know that stress causes gray hair, right? In America, we always joke when a president goes in, their hair is dark, and when they come out of office, it's gray. So we know that stress can cause premature graying, but it's not the only thing. So there are a number of dietary and lifestyle factors that can also influence gray hair. So there are a few things. Heavy metals in the body that can be problematic and cause premature graying.
Which come from?
So there's mercury in seafood, for example. It's in pollution, it's the air we breathe, the foods we eat. But I would say, like, diet-wise, probably seafood is probably most notorious for having heavy metals. But really any foods, sometimes you'll hear there's like arsenic in brown rice, or there's, different metals like lead, for example, in chocolate, because when plants are growing in the ground, they're picking up, some of these metals from the environment. And so we get them basically from our diet primarily. And the problem with metals in terms of our hair is that they actually block the absorption and the utilization of certain minerals. And we know that certain minerals deficiencies are associated with premature graying. So things like copper, for example, iodine, iron, if you're low in any of these nutrients, it could potentially cause premature graying. If you have premature gray hair and you have one of these deficiencies, adding in the foods that contain these nutrients could be beneficial for you. Similarly, if you have high heavy metals, which, for example, if you're someone who eats sushi all the time, you very well probably have high heavy metals, which you can test with your doctor, and they can help put a plan into place to help reduce those and remove some of those heavy metals. So those are some of the big factors. And another factor that I actually never really considered is really just even the circulation to your scalp. So my husband is Indian, and his mom always tells me, oh, you need to oil your hair, you need to do scalp massage, and they do it regularly, and her hair is stunning. And it turns out there's actually science behind this. So when we massage our scalp, we're helping to bring blood flow there. So whether or not you use oil or just your hands, you're bringing blood flow there, which brings oxygen, it brings nutrients, and it's helping to nourish the hair follicle. And this is good for both hair fall and for premature graying as well.
Yeah, I love when the science catches up to the ancient wisdom.
Right.
But definitely I've been using like a scalp massager, and I've actually noticed like more hair growth just from the idea of, bringing more blood circulation to the scalp.
Yeah.
But in this conversation, I'm just like hoping that my ancestors have been like really stressed really young, and so it's like stress grays. But no, I think for me it's genetic. But I just find it fascinating when you think of how the body shows you the different ways it deals with things. And it gives you these signs that say like, hey, something might be off, or you're causing things out of lifestyle choices. And the best part about all of this is they're free tools. Like, you can make these changes. You're eating anyway. So it's not like you have to spend more money to buy additional supplements or things like that. I mean, in an ordinary sense, they're decisions that you make every single day. So I find this information really empowering. One thing we haven't touched on actually is hydration. Does that play a role in our skin?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And hydration is not just necessarily drinking water. We also need to make sure that there's some electrolytes in there that's going to hydrate us properly. When we're just drinking water, it's not necessarily going to show up as super hydrated skin. We want to make sure that we're also getting enough electrolytes, so minerals that are going to help our body absorb that water and utilize that water better. So things like also bone broth are really helpful for hydration. Our juicy fruits and vegetables, right? Because they have the water content and they also have the minerals. Those are also very hydrating. So our diet absolutely plays a role.
Yeah, that's interesting. Electrolytes have only really come up when I'm thinking of going for a long walk outside in the heat. Like, I've never thought about using that on a regular basis. So I should be considering that.
Definitely. And definitely if you live in Dubai, because it's so humid here. And I would think in general, we're probably sweating more than people who live in other parts of the world. So it's really important that we're getting enough minerals. Those minerals are going to help us absorb that water and utilize that water better.
Really interesting. Another kind of buzzword or topic that's floating around quite a lot in the last few years is probiotics. Is that a wellness scam, or is there a role for them?
Definitely not a scam. Well, I guess it depends. There's probably some products on the market that are not great, but probiotics are fascinating. And I think the more that we learn about the gut microbiome, just the more that lives are going to change, because we're realizing that, traditionally when we thought about, let's say, acne, for example, we think of it as a bad bacteria. Traditionally, that's how it was thought of. And so we tried to kill this bad bacteria with antibiotics. But what ends up happening? We end up killing off also the good bacteria in our gut, and then this ends up creating more problems down the line, like gut problems, for example, and even skin problems. A lot of people who've been on antibiotics for acne find that even if their skin cleared while they were on antibiotics, in the months after, sometimes the acne returns, and often with a vengeance, because you've now disrupted the gut microbiome. And there is that gut-skin connection. So what the science shows us in terms of acne and skin health is that people with acne tend to actually lack some of the good lactobacillus and bifidobacteria in their gut. They tend to lack gut microbial diversity, so they have less different, number of strains in their gut. And they're more likely to have what's called increased intestinal permeability or leaky gut. On the flip side, studies have also shown that when people with acne add in certain probiotic strains like L. rhamnosus sp1 or L. acidophilus, for example, it can actually help to reverse the acne and help to clear the acne from the inside out. Similarly, with the skin barrier, we were talking about hydration earlier. Taking certain probiotics like L. paracasei and L. plantarum. This is really good to support the integrity of the gut lining, and it has also been shown to support skin health by supporting the skin barrier and reducing what's called transepidermal water loss, which kind of like dries out your skin. So I think probiotics really are the future, and I think that we're going to start in the future, instead of trying to kill bad bacteria, we're going to want to try to add in good bacteria that are going to keep those bad bacteria in check and not wipe out, the bugs that you need basically in your gut.
So interesting. One thing I learned in the last few years was that there's actually different strains of, these probiotics and different types that you need in your system. And so is it a risk when people buy probiotics off the shelf if they don't already know what strain they might be lacking in? Because, one on the shelf might have a dominance in one and not the other. And so if you're just taking one randomly that doesn't align with what you're deficient in, so to speak, is that really harmful?
So again, it really depends. So generally the lactobacillus and bifidobacteria strains, these are the most common probiotic strains that we've seen, and really used for decades. And they're the ones like lactobacillus strains. This is what's in fermented foods occurring naturally. And so these are probiotic strains that are naturally resident to the human gut, have a lot of beneficial properties, and generally lactobacillus and bifido, for the average person, adding it in is not going to be problematic. Now, if you have a specific issue or concern, like maybe you have rosacea or you have an immune condition, autoimmune condition, something, then I would say ideally you would work with a healthcare practitioner who can test you and see what's going on in your gut, and then give you targeted guidance in terms of, okay, this probiotic strain is going to be more beneficial for you than this one.
Right.
And then just to kind of close off the conversation, you'll sometimes see spore-based probiotics, which are soil-based organisms. And these are kind of newer to the market. And so those I find people are a bit more reactive to. Like some people are fine with them, but some people react to them a little bit negatively. So I would be a little bit more careful with the spore-based ones.
Interesting. Well, I guess like everything you've kind of shared today, it really, everyone is so different, and it's always best to work with like a professional to understand where you are before you go and make these massive changes. We're running out of time, but I do have one quick question for you. And this is like a personal or professional view. I'd love to get your thoughts on whether Botox, starting that in your 20s, is harmful for the skin, or is it really as anti-aging as it promises?
No, I'm not a fan of preventative Botox. It's a total scam. And what we're seeing now is that when we start doing Botox, really at any age, but especially at that young age, when you're paralyzing the muscles, once it wears off, your skin is actually becoming more lax. So it kind of creates the need to use more Botox. Like, I've never had Botox in my forehead. This is actually something I'm really passionate about, because when I was younger, probably, I don't know, 17 or 18, around there, I did Botox under my arms because it's also marketed as a way to stop sweating. And at that time, I was not into the health and wellness scene, wasn't thinking anything. But long story short, it created a lot of problems for me. It didn't stop my sweating, by the way. And it just created a lot of problems, like an autoimmune condition. And this was also something that helped me really get into health and wellness as well. And so the more research I did, the more I realized that, I mean, Botox, it's a toxin, right? It's botulinum toxin, and we're injecting this into our body. And I think that, as the decades go on, and I think it's already starting to kind of reverse this trend of doing it. I just think it's not good for our skin long term. And I think there's so many other ways that we can, I understand why people do it, right? But I think there's so many other ways that if we want to keep our skin looking, a certain way, I think there's so many other ways to do it that don't involve injecting poison into our face.
No, I definitely align with your vision. I've never had it myself. It's not something I'm considering, and I pass no judgment on people who do. But I am interested in the conversation of how we can nourish ourselves inside out rather than going to these topical things or, I guess, preventative things that maybe neglect the core work that needs to be done first and foremost. It's a personal decision at the end of the day, but I don't love the idea that you're like married to having to do it all the time.
Yeah.
And I've had conversations with people who've been getting it for like 10 years and they tell me like, I can't stop getting it now because if I do, my skin just drops.
Right.
And that just feels like the opposite of what it's meant to do. So it freaks me out a little bit.
Yeah.
But you're right. I think there is a big conversation of people more embracing just like the woman at every stage. And I'm really loving this. That's why I said I may let my hair go. It's difficult to say now because I'm 29 years old and I feel like aging is something I've only really started to think about now. But I am very much vocal of the inside out approach, and natural is best. And yeah, I just wanted to get your thoughts on it because it's always interesting. It's a very personal thing. And again, I'm not passing judgment on anyone, but I think a lot of people who listen to this show will align with the idea of trying to DIY it yourself, in the best way you can, most natural way.
And I will just add to that, of course, I have no judgment either. Like, I would probably do it had I not had the bad experience, that woke me up when I was 18. And getting an autoimmune, like right after it, I kind of, it really put me off to it. But what I will say, even with fillers, so fillers have become so popular over the years, but as I'm sure you may have seen on social media, what science is showing us now is that we used to think that they disappeared after a period of time, but they don't. They just move. And so people are getting MRIs 10 years after they got filler, and you can still see the filler in their face. And there's a plastic surgeon. I don't know why I watch this guy because he just pops up on my YouTube, but he's this plastic surgeon, and he talks about how when he has patients come into his practice who want a facelift, who've done a lot of fillers, the more filler they've done, it's actually harder because their muscles they're not like strong enough. He's like, they just kind of like melt, kind of, and so we don't really know what these things are doing to us. They're really still way too new. And sort of the enemy of our skin is inflammation. So the more we can manage our stress, the more antioxidants we can eat, the more we can keep our blood sugar stable, limit our sugar and processed foods, limit our alcohol. These things are all going to make a positive impact on our skin.
Amazing. Well, I've really loved everything you've shared today. I've learned a lot. I'm sure the listeners have too. Just want to thank you so much for your time. And you're always putting out amazing content. So I'm going to link all your profiles in the show notes so everyone can check it out. But thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.